First, though, joining me to have a further look at today's papers is the political commentator Alex Petropoulos. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, James.
Let's begin by talking about assisted dying, because it is a big week for the legislation. It's the second reading this Friday. And there's a really interesting story in the Times today under the headline, "Minister's Attempt to Impose Her Religious Beliefs is Wrong." Now, this is the Labour peer Lord Falconer, who is a former Justice Secretary, and he's accused the current Justice Secretary of trying to impose her Muslim beliefs on those in favour of assisted dying. Shabana Mahmood, of course, is the current Justice Secretary. She wrote a letter to her constituents in which she said she was profoundly concerned about the legislation, not just for religious reasons, but also because she said she was worried assisted dying was, and I quote, "a slippery slope towards death on demand." I mean, what do you make of Lord Falconer hitting out at Shabana Mahmood? Is there anything wrong with people who are, cautious or opposed to assisted dying saying, look, this could be a slippery slope?
So there's a lot to unpack there. To start with, the accusations of, governing by religious intent or passing laws or being opposed to laws because of one's religious beliefs. I think that they can guide you, but as a fundamental principle, I think this law is about bodily autonomy. It's about saying, it's my body, I want to be able to do what I want with it. And you can draw a really nice parallel to that with bodily autonomy and abortion rights in both the UK, but also in the US. And so you should look at it the exact same way as maybe a Christian MP choosing to vote down on abortion access because of their religious beliefs to that. And so I think that, maybe it should inform their personal views, but definitely they shouldn't be allowing it to sort of dictate what they think is right and wrong and dictate what they think the laws of the country should be. And then on this whole slippery slope argument, I think that if MPs really think that this is, a slippery slope argument and not a steadfast opposition, then the correct move there is just to tweak the bill, to make edits and changes, to say, actually, let's make sure the waiting period is a bit longer. Let's make sure you need one extra layer of accountability and scrutiny and a little bit more friction to the process so that it doesn't lead to this slippery slope.
But isn't the precedent, Alex, from other countries where they have legalised assisted dying, that actually what begins, like what is being proposed in the UK, as a strictly safeguarded piece of legislation, inevitably does get broadened to include people never originally intended to be included? I mean, the example a lot of people cite, for example, is Canada, which is in many respects quite a comparable country, similar culture, same language, similar political system to us. They legalised assisted dying in 2016, much like what's being proposed in the UK, with strict safeguards only for terminally ill adults. By 2021, that had been broadened to include anyone whose condition was deemed serious and incurable, which is a far broader definition. And now you have people in Canada who are eligible for an assisted death if they have a mental health condition, eligible for an assisted death if they have an eating disorder. There are even some Canadians now who are coming forward asking to be killed for non-medical reasons, such as isolation and homelessness. Now, Canada has gone on that journey in just 8 years. Is that not a good example of where a slippery slope actually is very real?
So, look, the Canada system seems wrong, right? They've made a mistake, and we definitely shouldn't end up where they are. But again, to make a comparison with abortion, I think it's a good comparison here. Lots of conservatives will make the comparison to abortion rights after, several amounts of months and say, if you allow this, they're going to be aborting babies up to conception, up to 9 months pregnancy, right? And they'll say it's a slippery slope. You don't know where it will take you. And we can clearly see that that's not the case in countries, and that, a limited right to giving people bodily autonomy, giving people choice over their bodies, doesn't lead to this crazy runaway effect where suddenly we have things that are clearly wrong and clearly out of proportion happening. And so, yes, Canada is an example of, that's not good. We shouldn't aim for that. But we have, just as this bill wants to give people autonomy over their bodies, we as a people have autonomy over where we want our laws to go. We get to control and decide, it will take a second amendment to the bill. It will take, additional legislation to create this slippery slope effect that you described. So we could just vote against it when it comes to that.
Well, this debate, of course, this kind of public conversation we've been having, of course, is going to rumble on. The second reading of the assisted dying bill is this Friday. So plenty more discussion around that to come. Let's move on to Band Aid, Alex, and the row over whether its lyrics are patronising to Africa. Should we get the elephant in the room out of the way first? You admitted to me this morning you've never really heard Band Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas, which probably reveals how young you are.
Yes, this is true. I've heard of it, I know the concept of it, but I sort of listened to a little bit of it this morning and, did not ring a bell.
But it's on every Christmas. Do you not hear it on the radio? You can't walk into a shop at Christmas time without it blaring over the tannoy.
Maybe I've heard it in the background, but my brain does not have that connection. When you hear the song, you're like, oh yeah, that song, I've heard it before. It's like, no.
Well, it is an interesting point. I mean, the debate now, of course, the reason this is topical is because they're releasing today a 40th anniversary version of it. And of course, it was designed to raise money for, impoverished people in Africa. But some of the lyrics have been criticised, particularly in recent years, for being patronising and outdated. I mean, for example, there's the lyric, and there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas time. People are saying, well, there's definitely snow in Africa, where nothing ever grows, no rain or river flows. Do they know it's Christmas? Yes, they do. Ethiopia adopted Christianity long before places such as England. Do you think it's fair to say that some of the lyrics are patronising almost to Africa?
Definitely outdated, and I think you could almost even go as far as patronizing. You have to be asking what the purpose of the song is, and if you want to use it very domestically and have it be for charitable causes domestically, you could do that. At the point where it starts being used for the purpose of raising money for people in Africa, then you also have to say, okay, let's actually try and get things right. I said I haven't heard the song before. That does, bring us into a question 40 years is a very long time. Maybe if you want to do, charitable things, you might be more effective if you went about and wrote a new song that maybe appealed to younger generations. And, I'm sure there's a lot you could do with it. The music, they're a lot more creative than me, the music industry. So I don't really have to tell them how to do this and what sort of music, what sort of style of music they should go for, whether they should get Billie Eilish on or Sabrina Carpenter, take your lead. But I think there's a real opportunity there.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia is quoted in the Times today saying that he acknowledged the Band Aid was well-meaning in response to more than 1 million people starving back in the 1984 famine. But he said it's frustrating to see our nation's ancient history, culture, diversity and beauty reduced to doom and gloom. And he says Ethiopia is unrecognisable from the country that the Bob Geldof saw back in the 80s. Thank you for your messages on this. Jerry says, hi James, Band-Aid is well past its sell-by date. The third world does not need charity, it needs monitored foreign aid. But David says, oh, for goodness sake, the Band-Aid song was written in a hurry at a time when there had been 2 consecutive years of drought and famine in Ethiopia. 1 million people died. Literally nothing was growing and the rivers were dry. Give Midge Ure and Bob Geldof a break. 2 sides of the debate there. Keep your messages coming, please. 0333 003 2353 is the number on WhatsApp. Just finally, Alex, let's talk about singing in the cinema. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, of course, has been quoted as saying that fans should feel free to sing in the cinema as he attended the UK premiere of Moana 2. He says, especially if you love music, that is the fun part. Now, I mentioned earlier on, I went to Wicked on Friday night, which obviously is a musical. And I went to the IMAX at Waterloo on a massive screen, and it was the first day it came out. Frankly, I was probably the only person there who wasn't a Wicked superfan because it was full of people who'd dressed up in costumes. They all knew it. And the theatre staff stood up at the beginning and said, look, we're all here. If you want to sing, if you want to kind of join in, you can, but quietly, which I think is a bit weird. I don't want audience members singing at the cinema. Where do you stand on this?
I am very conflicted, James, because admittedly, I'm a bit of a musical fan. Big fan of Moana. It's my go-to karaoke song, if you don't know. But and the Wicked songs have been stuck in my head for the last couple of weeks. And so I'm incredibly conflicted because, it's a musical. You want to sing along, but also the music recordings of these songs are like really impeccable. And you don't want them ruined over, the person to your left who's like screeching out, missing every note. I think there is a nuanced, centrist dad take to this, which is that there are separate screenings for those who wish to sing and go all out and treat it more like a musical, more like a sing-along. And I think there have already been some sing-along versions of Wicked planned or being put out. And then, screenings for maybe the normies, if you want to call them, or those who just want to sit there and actually enjoy the really nice show and enjoy the singing. I wouldn't judge people, because if I were to start judging people for singing along, I think all my coworkers would then begin to judge me and say, Alex, you've been humming these songs for 2 weeks now.
I think humming the songs or singing them in the shower is one thing. The other thing they were doing at this Wicked thing, they started applauding after some of the songs, and at the end of the film they started clapping, and you think, okay, you might have enjoyed the film, but it's not like when you go to the theatre and you want to show your appreciation for the cast on stage. I found it a bit odd, but anyway, maybe it's a modern phenomenon. Alex, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That's the political commentator Alex Petropoulos there discussing the stories in today's papers.